the advertisement. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Neva Cochran. I am a registered dietitian nutritionist and a licensed dietitian, and I am the moderator of this session today, Sweeteners in Schools, Keeping Science First in a Controversial Discussion. As we all know, the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act was passed in December 2010 to strengthen the existing nutrition standards for the national school lunch and breakfast programs. With reimbursement at just $1.55 for breakfast and $2.86 for lunch to cover food, labor, supplies, and equipment costs, school nutrition personnel are challenged to provide meals that children will eat as well as meet the USDA nutrition standards. Today, our panel will address the registered dietitian's role in school nutrition when dealing with highly charged debates about foods and ingredients that are served in school meals. We'll use the topic of sweeteners as an example, and we will explore how the registered dietitian can stay true to the mission to feed and educate children while relying on science when parents and staff sometimes make decisions based on emotions and sensational media headlines. So how can the RD balance their business interests, scientific knowledge, and responsibility to provide children with nutrient-rich meals that they will enjoy and eat? Our panelists will share examples of challenges and opportunities, specific tools available, and more perspective on lessons learned. So now I'd like to introduce our panel. First, and I'll just have them raise their hand when I introduce them. First, we have Dr. Tammy Klein, who is a registered and licensed dietitian and the president is a registered dietitian with over 20 years' experience as a school nutrition professional. As the owner of Klein Consulting, she works with food service manufacturers to provide sales and marketing training. She develops recipes and marketing materials and technical research, and she's a popular speaker for a variety of groups. Next, we have Ann Dunaway-Tay, a registered and licensed dietitian who is the president of Dunaway Dietetics Incorporated, a nutrition consulting business providing services for individuals in business. In addition to counseling individuals, families, and athletes, Ann has more than 15 years of experience managing and consulting with restaurants, hospitals, and school programs, and she recently developed a nutrition program for a national daycare franchise. Ann and I both serve on the Registered Dietitian Network with the Corn Refiners Association, and our session today is sponsored by SweetenersStudies.com, which is a resource of the Corn Refiners Association. And finally, our third speaker is Margie Seidel, also a registered dietitian and the Vice President of Nutrition and Sustainability for Chartwell Schools Dining Services, where she develops the strategic approach to child nutrition for approximately 600 school districts. Margie's child nutrition experience includes work as a school food service director, leadership roles in the School Nutrition Association, and curriculum development for a school food service management satellite course for school food professionals. She has more than 20 years of experience as in the child nutrition and food service industries. So now we're going to begin with a series of questions which each of our panelists will address, and then at the end we will have an opportunity for the audience to ask questions as well. I do want to make sure that everyone received a flash drive when you came in. If you didn't, they are available in the back of the room from my interns, Hadis, and now I forgot her name. Monica. And there is also a place for you to sign up to get new information about sweetener studies, so you can sign up in the back if you didn't receive that. And I think that's everything. So now let's go on with the first question. And the first question, as a registered dietitian, what are some of the misconceptions about sweeteners that you hear? And first off, I will start out because I have been working with the Corn Refiners Association for 5 years. And one of the most common misconceptions that I hear is that people think that high fructose corn syrup is somehow different from sucrose and that it's metabolized differently in the body. That always seems to be an issue. So I'm going to start off with Ann.
Thank you, Neva. I think one thing that I often hear is that people are really confused about naturally occurring sugars in foods versus added sugars in foods. I think that the food label, as we all know, makes this really hard to understand, so you definitely have to educate people on reading the ingredient list to help them decipher. But I think a great example of that is with yogurt. We all know that yogurt has naturally occurring sugars in it, but then if it's a flavored yogurt, it also has added sugars, and I think that's very hard for the consumer to understand that difference and how to tell one from the other. Another thing that I also hear about is the confusion about artificial or non-nutritive sweeteners. And people don't understand, what's their use, what's the safety behind it. And of course, as we all know, natural is the new buzzword, and so they're looking for the more natural alternative. Stevia is a really popular one right now. People think, oh, it's more natural, it's not processed, which, it really is processed in order to extract the sweetness out, unless they're actually using that leaf, which, some people do, but not many do that.
Hey, thank you, Ann. Okay, Tammy.
Hi, I'd like to concur with what Ann has said and start out by saying I have always embraced the philosophy of the Academy, which is all foods fit, because they truly do. We've all heard in this room a lot of the blame that schools get for causing childhood obesity, be it flavored milks or juices or sodas or whatever. But the fact is, like Ann said, when it comes down to it, a sugar is a sugar. And there's some research, and I believe this is on that hard drive that you're going to get, or that little floppy drive you're going to get, that while obesity and diabetes has been increasing in our country, the consumption of sweeteners has gone down. And the Corn Refiners Association and other associations like the National Dairy Council have done a lot to educate school food service professionals about sweeteners at schools. And just back to flavored milk, when it comes to flavored milk in schools, kids prefer flavored milk over non-flavored milk. And as a dietitian, I would prefer to see kids drink flavored milk than no milk at all.
Okay. Margie, would you like to add something more?
Thank you, Neva, and good morning, everyone. In my experience in schools, many parents are concerned more about the type of sugar that's found in foods, which distracts them from the overriding issue of what's the nutrient density of the foods that the students are eating in schools. There's a lot of concern, as our panelists have already talked about, over high fructose corn syrup, flavored milk, and whether a sugar in a food is natural or added. In my view, I think we need to change the conversation to what is the nutrient density of the food, and is it the appropriate amount of calories? If a student will eat a nutrient-dense food because it has some added sweetener, we need to help parents decide whether that, in fact, is a good trade-off. If a student is going to drink milk or eat flavored yogurt with the rich nutrients that are inside of those foods, parents need to decide whether that's a good trade-off or not. And I think in schools, we need to just provide them with that information and really change the conversation to nutrient density and appropriate calories.
Thank you. So just to summarize for this question, there seems to be confusion about sugars on the food label, the nutrition facts panel. Many people don't realize that that represents both added sugars and naturally occurring sugars. Also, people don't seem to understand that high fructose corn syrup and sucrose are the same nutritionally, and the body metabolizes them in the same way. And finally, there are people, parents and teachers and others, that don't seem to understand that flavored milk with a small amount of sugar is better than drinking no milk at all. All right, our second question is, in your job, how are you able to translate the science behind your decisions for non-RD audiences? Can you remember a specific example that worked well or a time that was particularly difficult for you? And this time we're going to start off with Tammy.
Okay, thank you, Neva. I recently sat next to an individual on a plane, and she was very intrigued by the fact that I was a registered dietitian, and she informed me that she was a nutritionist, because she had taken a couple holistic medicine classes. So she was a nutritionist and I was a registered dietitian. And she had several questions, and especially as they related to schools and the nutrition in schools today. And one of the things she commented on, she wondered when all sugars would be banned in schools. And it was kind of a challenge to answer the question, but it was obvious that she had a real interest in nutrition in schools. And she told me she thought she'd go back to school. And so I encouraged her to look into accredited dietetics programs so she could become a registered dietitian, and then also to think about evidence-based research and broad ranges of research when she's making decisions on what she's going to say about nutrition and nutrition in schools.
Great. Okay, Margie, we're going to follow up with you.
Sure. The USDA, who regulates the school meals programs, requires that each school district have a wellness policy and a wellness committee. And those are unique opportunities for parents, community members, as well as registered dietitians to get involved in the school meals program. Quite often, these committees are in a place where the people who are on the committees may not understand the science, and they make decisions about policy in schools based on their own personal experiences with their own kids or information that's in the media. So I would encourage all registered dietitians to get involved in their school wellness committee in order to make changes in the school policy. Even if you don't have children in the school, it's really important that we get people who understand the science so the school policy really reflects the science of nutrition. And I have some examples because I often have to make presentations in front of these wellness committees and school boards. And a lot of questions come up about these things that are in the news. For example, they talk a lot about maybe added sugar that might be added to whole grain bread because they don't necessarily think that sugar should be in bread. What I have to do is explain to them that maybe a little added sweetener, as I mentioned before, is a good thing in order to have the food be palatable and pleasing to the child so that the child will eat that very nutritious food like whole grain bread. Another example is yogurt. A sweetened yogurt is probably a good thing for a small child who may not eat the yogurt if it's plain yogurt, or plain yogurt with fruit is a great thing. But sugar, a little bit of sugar-sweetened yogurt is also an okay thing. Another example I have is when we were bidding on a school district, they had asked for flavored milk not to be served in schools at all. And in my company, whatever the school district wants is, of course, what we will give them. But luckily, I had the opportunity to explain the facts about flavored milk, and the added sugar probably amounted to less than 50 calories, and that they needed to think about whether they wanted children in that school district to drink milk at all. And I talk about a small study that we did in one of our school districts where we took away flavored milk and measured milk consumption, and it did go down 30 to 40%. So it's important that we as registered dietitians get ourselves in those situations where we can explain the science and then allow people in the positions of power to make educated decisions.
Thank you. And I would like to add to that, because sometimes people are really concerned that there is sugar in a lot of foods. And she mentioned bread as an example. There are 2 grams of sugar in a slice of bread. But people don't realize that sugar is not just in foods to sweeten it. Sugar is a functional ingredient. And the reason that sugar is in bread is for 2 reasons. It helps with browning. And the second one is, especially it works better for high fructose corn syrup, it retards the spoilage of the bread. And the reason that high fructose corn syrup works better than sugar in this instance is because high fructose corn syrup is 1 molecule of fructose and 1 molecule of glucose, whereas sucrose is the 2 monosaccharides bonded together. When you have free fructose, it absorbs water. And so when bread that's made with high fructose corn syrup, it absorbs and holds in the water. And when you have water, your bread's getting dry and stale, that's why, because it's losing moisture. So that's why manufacturers actually prefer using high fructose corn syrup in bread to sugar, because then the bread will last longer, stay fresher longer. But there's a lot of reasons that fermentation and browning and other reasons that sugar and high fructose corn syrup are used in foods that has nothing to do with sweetening. And often, that may be something that needs to be explained to some of these people that have concerns about it. All right, Anne, I'm going to go to you next on this question.
Sure. I think it's really important that you listen to the consumer and really understand what their concerns are, because sometimes their concerns are not really what they're saying. So when a parent is saying that they want organic dairy, what they might really be saying is, I really want a hormone-free milk, which that's found in many conventional milks these days. So it's really important that you understand their concerns, you speak to those concerns, and then also use examples. So that's one example. But then also to piggyback on what Margie was saying with the flavored milk, in the school district where I worked, we had a very active parent group at one of our elementary schools who really wanted to push for the removal of flavored milk from the school. And so we did our own study where we tracked milk consumption the way it was. Then we removed, at that time we served 3 different flavored milks, chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. We removed all flavored milks, tracked consumption for a month. There was a very, very sharp decrease in milk consumption. It was very dramatic. And then when we reintroduced the flavored milk, it went back up. So we actually reached a compromise with this parent group to only offer 2 of those 3 flavors at lunch at that particular school. And then we also, talked to them about, showed them the food labels and showed that how we had actually worked with our provider to lower the amount of added sugar that was in those flavored milks. And again, so once we showed that and demonstrated with the food label, it really helped their understanding, and we reached a great compromise.
Great. So in summarizing this question, I think that one of the things that came out loud and clear is that we need to listen to the concerns of others. We need to listen and address them sensitively as possible and look for, especially issues like organics and sugars that are hot button issues with a lot of parents and, very emotional. So we need to try to communicate effectively with them, and as they've said, if you have data that you can show them, that you're really losing, not only they're not drinking milk, they're losing all these nutrients, and maybe reach a compromise where they feel like that they are actually winning something. Explain the difference, like they said, in the small amount of calories and sugar that you have in a flavored milk, which the only one that you can have now is non-fat flavored milk, and then you can have 1% white, and the calorie difference is often just maybe 20 to 30 calories and a few grams of sugar, and when they actually see the facts, they may be more inclined to be accepting of it. All right, our third question is, how do you balance cost and health in your decision making about sweeteners? Margie?
Thanks, Neva. If I could see a show of hands, how many people have read about or heard about the school meals programs over the last year or 6 months? Mostly everybody, I thought so. And some of you, I'm sure, are parents who have, your kids are eating school meals, and some of you, if you don't have your own kids, probably have some kids in your extended family who are part of the school meals program. So you probably have heard about a lot of changes that are occurring in the USDA programs, but you may not have heard a lot about the cost issues that are really plaguing the industry. The school meals programs need to be financially self-sufficient, meaning that the revenue that they take in from the sale of the foods, as well as the reimbursement that they receive from the government, needs to cover all of their expenses, and that includes the food, the labor, as well as equipment, paper goods, and any other expenses they might have. So this leaves about $1 for food cost. So if anybody who's been to a grocery store lately understands that $1 for a very nutritious meal is tight and challenging. And the same is true for schools. So what the schools try to do is purchase the most nutritionally dense food possible to create a healthy, balanced meal. So one thing that we do to offset the cost is we have purchasing power, and we also work with our vendors. So a good example of how we have done that is pizza crust. So you know, all kids love pizza. It's still the #1 food for kids. So what we did was work with a pizza crust manufacturer to create a crust that is lower sodium, contains olive oil, flaxseed, and honey to sweeten it a little bit. And so we were able to work with that vendor and our purchasing power to create this very nutritious pizza crust at a lower cost than it was costing us to provide a white pizza crust. So that's an example of how we have to work with the food costs, because we can't, because $1 for food is really very, very difficult and challenging for schools.
Thank you, Margie. Anne?
Sure, and as Margie alluded to, you've got the set budget, you have the cost per meal benchmark that you meet. And so you work within those standards to balance the money you have and to choose the best products, what you have available. The USDA commodity program also helps stretch that money further. And there are some great choices within the USDA commodity. And so you can have, there are some fruits and vegetables that are available, of course meats and cheeses, that helps stretch your money to go a little bit further. But I think it's really important that you keep in mind the bigger nutrition picture and not focus on any one ingredient or nutrient when you're making these decisions. And then also, ultimately, at the end of the day, is the acceptability of the children. If they don't like the product, if they don't eat the food, then we have accomplished nothing.
Very true. Okay, Tammy, what do you have to add?
Well, I just ditto what Margie has said and what Anne has said. It really is a balancing act because, you know, thinking about the food, the labor, the equipment, the supplies, that all goes into that $2.86 that you mentioned at the beginning for lunch and about $1.55 for breakfast. And kind of a standard rule of thumb is that your food costs are about 40% of your revenue. So that would be about 60 cents for the food for breakfast. And as Margie said, about $1, maybe $1 and a few pennies for lunch. So that all has to be considered when you're planning the meals and meeting all the requirements of USDA. But just to reinforce also what Margie said, we're very fortunate to have manufacturers that have worked very hard with us to reformulate products so that they are lower in sugar, lower in fat, lower in sodium. So we've got partners in the industry that work well with us.
Thank you. So to summarize the responses from this question, what I heard was it's important to focus on the big picture and not one food or ingredient. That school nutrition departments have tight budgets and it makes it challenging to provide nutrient-rich meals that kids will enjoy, but you can be innovative and you should certainly work with your vendors to try to, because school nutrition departments are really big customers and so they can, work with these vendors to get the products that they need that will meet the nutritional standards, but also be something that children will eat. And so you have to balance the acceptance by the children with the cost as well as all the regulations. So it really is a challenge. And as they say, food not eaten provides no nutritional value. Okay, our next question is, what are the tools you use to keep your colleagues, parents, and others, help your colleagues, parents, and others understand your decision making? And this time I'm going to start with Margie.
Some great references for schools is the USDA Food and Nutrition Service. They provide wonderful information about the school lunch program. And I encourage all of you to get involved also with the Academy's Kids Eat Right program. As a volunteer, you'll have access to lots of information about school nutrition, about pediatric nutrition, and some information about how you can help schools make the right decisions and parents make the right decisions. I think research shows that we can't make a difference only in schools. It's impossible to make a difference in one location and expect students and children and adolescents to make any change in their eating behavior. That really has to happen at the home, in the community, and in the classroom. And I think as dietitians, we really are in the best situation to create a healthy food environment in homes by really supporting parents' decisions about how they eat themselves and how they feed their children.
Okay, thank you. Tammy?
The Academy has great resources, and in addition to what Margie mentioned, I always turn to the position papers. And there's a position paper on nutritive and non-nutritive sweeteners that you can turn to. There is a position paper on local support for nutrition integrity in schools. And there is a fairly recent position that was adopted by the Academy, the School Nutrition Association, and the Society for Nutrition Education and Behavior. And it's on comprehensive school nutrition services. So I'd encourage you to turn to those position papers, and they're filled with lots of references. I also go back to the dietary guidelines for Americans, the 2010 guidelines. We're all familiar with those. They're on the web at the USDA website. And in particular, if you go to Chapter 5, since we're talking about sweeteners, there's some information in Chapter 5. And the panel that put together the dietary guidelines specifically state that it's better to have a little bit of a sweetener in a nutritious food, like we've all mentioned, such as milk and cereals, in order to really encourage those nutrient-dense foods to get consumed.
Thank you, Tammy. And then Ann's going to finish this question off.
Okay. I think both Margie and Tammy have listed some great resources that I certainly often use and recommend. But I think helpful to that is the MyPlate website itself. It's a really wonderful tool to, again, help people focus on that bigger nutrition picture and not get hung up on one nutrient or one ingredient. And then the subsections for preschoolers, children, and even health professionals has, again, great resources and great tools that you can use with parents and consumers in general. I also like to use the American Academy of Pediatrics consumer website, healthychildren.org. It's extremely helpful. And if you didn't see their recent review of the research on organic foods that came out in October, that is a really great tool to use in speaking to parents who are concerned about organic dairy or organic foods, and that really helps back us up that at the end of the day, it's really more important that we encourage fruit and vegetable consumption, or dairy in general, whether it's organic or not. Then the last thing I like to use a lot is Ellen Satter's website, who's a pioneer of the division of responsibility, because it's really important that children, that parents understand that children do have a decision in the food that they eat, because when they're at the point of service in the schools, they're the ones making the decision. And then when you, in the past, when I've been in the elementary schools, there's some teachers and parents who really don't want offer versus serve with the younger age children. And so using that division of responsibility research really helps speak to that, to help them understand that children do have a say in what they eat.
Thank you. So there were several different resources that were mentioned here: the USDA website, the National School Food Service Management Institute, the Academy of Pediatrics, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, both position papers, and also the evidence analysis library is available. And then you can look to reliable industry sources as well, like the National Dairy Council, especially on this milk issue, and the Corn Refiners Association. On your flash drive, I'm just going to hold this up. I know most of you can't see it, but there is one PDF in this that's titled Sweetener Studies, and this actually takes you to a landing page on the Sweetener Study website that gives you links to a lot of different resources and different organizations that have information that they have mentioned here. In addition to many other, on the flash drive, there are many other references as well, but there's one that actually takes you to a website when you click on the link that will give you a lot of the different resources that they have mentioned here. So hope that that will be helpful to you. So we've talked about, resources that you use and go to, but what tools maybe would be helpful that you don't have? And this time I'm going to start with Tammy.
Thanks, Neva. I'm going to start out by saying I am amazed at how tech-savvy school food service professionals are. If you belong to their listserv, you probably get 100 email messages a day on that. But recently, through some of the research that I have done, I polled food service directors and asked them, how do you best communicate with your various audiences? And I had about 200 responses. And when asked about how do you communicate with students, they said They use social media, that's their #1 source, followed by in-person meetings or classroom education. When asked about how do you communicate with parents, they said it's the school website, the school website, the school website, followed by print media. Teachers were asked, they were asked about teachers as well. Teachers, same answer as parents, the school website, print materials, and then also teachers really supported in classroom education. And then finally we asked about how do you communicate with advocacy groups or the media, and they said that the media really turns to their website, so it's important that they keep the website up to date, and then also they provide print communications for the media. So when I boil this all down, it really ends up being print materials and materials that can be used on the internet or through social media.
Great. Okay, Margie?
Thanks. I completely agree with Tammy that social media is becoming more and more important. And as I look out into the audience, so many of you are so young and beautiful. We all have to, we are struggling. We are actually trying to set up a mobile app for Chartwell's menus to be able to provide information to parents and families about what their children are eating in school, and maybe some information about what they could be eating. Because you have probably all been in the situation where everybody is a nutrition expert, right? Because everybody eats food, so of course everybody is a nutrition expert. So it's very important that we provide tools to people that are so understandable and are food related. I know as my career has progressed in nutrition, we used to talk a lot about nutrients, and I'm sure many of you have been in that boat. But we need to, and we talk a lot about food ingredients and food products. We need to change that and start talking about the food itself and why we should eat that, maybe why something else might be a better choice. And in terms of tools, we also should be working with chefs, and I know, we're progressing a lot in the industry with that because chefs talk about food, but it's also important for a dietitian to be available to talk about the scientific basis of that food, because as we talk about, food is such a personal thing and nutrition is such a personal thing that it's so difficult for people to not relay their personal biases, even a chef. So we as nutrition professionals understand the science. So any tools that you use when you talk with parents or kids, really think about it. Is it in plain English? Is it easy to understand? Does somebody have to interpret scientific information to get the message? If they do, then it's not the right tool. And I think social media is helping us with that because everything has to be short and concise, and you can't go on and on as we as dietitians often like to do, because when we talk, we like to tell everybody everything we know about the subject. We can't just stop at the information that they might need to know at that point. So that's my advice about tools. Make sure it's easily understandable, short, concise, and about the food, because that's the most easily relatable information.
Thank you. Anne?
Thank you. And I agree that definitely social media technology is really changing the way that we communicate with our audiences. But I think it's also really important to think about in the school itself, in the cafeteria, providing promotional materials to the cafeteria managers and the school staff so they can promote the program, help encourage students to try these new foods that they're maybe not used to, and just to encourage participation in the school lunch program. And so, because it's really important to remember who are the customers at the point of service. It's the students. It's also the school staff, the teachers, and certainly they are role modeling if they eat in the cafeteria or not, and their reaction to the food. But again, the students, we have to keep in mind the students. And so in my school district, we started doing a lot with clings that would attach to the serving line itself, putting nutrition facts on those, maybe some fun trivia. It really helped kind of bring to life the food and focus on the food. so that they would make better choices. But then also, obviously, food presentation makes a big difference as well in how food looks. I think, school districts need to do more sharing of what they're doing. And I absolutely love the Facebook page. If you've not seen it, it's called School Meals That Rock. Dale Hayes out of Montana started this Facebook page a couple of years ago to highlight what is right with school nutrition. There's some districts out there doing some wonderful, wonderful things, very, very creative, and she highlights that every day on her Facebook page. So it's a great resource for getting inspiration, for getting ideas. So I really encourage that.
Thank you. Yes, I have to second that about Dale Hayes' School Meals That Rock Facebook page, because it's really a wonderful resource and has wonderful pictures, and it's a great place to share ideas from people all over the country. Some of the other things that our panelists have identified as tools that could be helpful are easy to understand fact sheets on hot nutrition issues, promotional materials that help to increase school meal participation, and also especially resources for electronic communication, both for school websites and social media, because that's becoming more and more of a way that both students and parents and teachers are communicating and looking for information. So now we have our sixth question, and it's going to kind of be the end of our discussion, and then open it up for you to discuss. How do you balance all of these existing challenges with the regulatory pressure to implement the new USDA school nutrition standards? And I'm going to start off with Tammy.
Well, it is a challenge, and I admire any school food service director that's in this audience or anywhere in the country that has fully implemented the new regulations. They are very challenging, and quite a learning process and a process to train your staff on them. But I want to go back to, we have to be clear about how we communicate the new regulations to our audiences, such as the parents and the teachers. So communication is key. And again, you as a resource, if you're a dietetics practitioner and you are currently working in a school, I encourage you to get involved with your local board meetings, with your state association, and with advocacy groups, because embrace these different constituents, and that way you can bring them along with the new regulations. If you're not currently working in a school district, but you would like to get involved, I think that is wonderful. But I just have one request. Please go to the school food service director first, because there's nothing more annoying, and it's happened probably to all of us, that when a parent that might be a dietitian goes to a teacher or goes to the superintendent first and didn't come to me as a dietitian and running a food service program. So that is the first step of entry in working in a school district and being a resource and advocate for the school meal program.
Yes, great. Anne?
Sure, and as Tammy said, the standards are quite strict, but sometimes a national policy doesn't quite take into account maybe specific needs of a district, or maybe things are a little bit different in one setting, and so it's some of the challenges have been decreased student acceptance of these new meals. Plate waste has been an issue that you've probably heard about or maybe seen on YouTube. Again, limited revenues, maybe not quite the right kitchen equipment for maybe more fruits and vegetables, and then training is certainly an issue a lot of schools are having an issue with. So it's really important to think outside the box and what you can do to introduce new foods to students, doing taste tests, offering samples, and that's a great way to encourage students to try foods. And then the National Food Service Management Institute is a wonderful resource that has many free training resources. So I think that really helps, to help back up what you're doing or get ideas. And again, continue to share ideas. I think it's extremely important.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, Margie.
Wow, school foods. Until now, with the passage of the Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010, the school meal regulations and guidance hadn't changed for about 15 years. So that's part of why everybody over the past 5 years, if you've been paying attention, has been really up in arms, because the school meal regulations were not keeping up with nutrition knowledge and what we understood about how kids should eat. So this is a great thing. It's great that school meals programs need to meet the new 2010 dietary guidelines for Americans, and we're now progressing so that we must serve meals that meet the dietary guidelines and that will also set kids up for a very long and healthy life. But these guidelines are very challenging. It's a big change because you can imagine there wasn't a lot of significant change for 15 years, and now this is all coming at one time. So that would be challenging for anybody. Change is very difficult. And as we talked about before, school meals programs need to be financially solvent. So they can't just change and not worry about it. If students don't purchase the meal, then they go out of business. They have to then ask the school district for money that may have been in a bucket to pay for a teacher's salary, for example. So it's something that we need to take very seriously. But I encourage you to think about the big picture and not think so much about what's difficult, what's easy, how are the school food professionals coping with this change. Let's think about what's going on. School meals are changing, fabulous. But as I said before, that's not the only place where we need the change. We need to support families so that they're doing the same thing at home. And our community restaurants are doing the same thing in the communities. So the food environment is healthy. And that's what's difficult for schools. If they're not seeing this healthy food elsewhere in their lives, it's going to be very difficult for them to choose that food in schools because it's not familiar. And we all know, especially with younger kids, that they need to be exposed to a food many, many times before they'll eat it. Maybe 15 to 20 times. A school food professional does not have 20 times before a child will choose to participate in the school meals program. So we need to really be very quick about trying to figure out how to get kids to enjoy healthy foods, but even before that, to choose the healthy foods. So we in Chartwell's, our new wellness platform is going to be about families because we need to support what's going on in schools the same way we support what's going on in schools with education so that everybody is on the same page and we're all encouraging our kids to participate in the meals so that they get healthy meals in schools and the school food programs can remain financially solvent.
Thank you. Excellent points. I have been an advocate of school nutrition for many years since I worked in the 80s for the dairy industry and did work with school nutrition in that capacity. And, a couple of studies that I have used over the years and cite that I think are important to keep in mind and kind of reinforce what our panelists have said is that studies have shown that children who eat lunch at school not only have a better nutritional intake for that meal, but they have a better nutritional intake for the entire 24-hour period. And also, studies have shown that the number of calories that a child gets at school is really a small part of their total daily calories, that children are getting a lot of calories outside of school. So when people are really targeting the school meals as somehow a problem in child nutrition or obesity, I think that really is not borne out by the data because there are so many other influences. And I think one of the important points that was made here is that we need to, as school nutrition and as parents and others in the community, we need to be making sure that children are receiving nutrition education in school so that they can take that information and translate that into places outside of the school environment so they're not only eating well in school because they have these wonderful guidelines that they've had for years. I mean, we have new guidelines, but there have been guidelines for school nutrition since the 1940s, and they have always been nutrient-rich and a good source of nutrition for children. So we need to help them in accomplishing that kind of nutritional intake in other venues outside of the school. Also, one of the other messages that I heard the panel saying that if you are an RD parent, please go to the school nutrition director first if you have concerns or questions rather than going to other people in the school district because we need to be allies and we need to support each other. Also, parents must be partners with school in achieving good nutrition for kids. And as I said, not only in the school, but also outside the school, so children are getting a consistent message about nutrition. And also that it's important for the school nutrition RDs to work together with the teachers to encourage nutrition education in the classroom and nutritious eating, you know, all the time. And some of the ways that they can do that is to have like taste tests and sampling of new menu items to help them determine which types of foods will be more acceptable. I do want to emphasize again that we have, you know, the flash drives that have just an abundance of resources for you, as well as, you know, if you didn't get a flash drive, to get one. And there also is a page in the back that you can sign up to be emailed updated information about Sweeteners as it becomes available. And finally, in your registration bag that you received, this comes, some people were saying, where did this come from? This is the flashcards. They're sugar flashcards that were put together by the Corn Refiners Association, and I actually worked on these flashcards, and I've had really positive feedback so far from a variety of people about these, but they have each of the different sugars in there, and it explains about them. So if you, this is on your flash drive as well as in your packet, but if you are interested in having more of these, some people were asking me, please see me, and I will see about, you know, getting you more quantities of these if you have a way that you can use them. So that actually concludes our question and answer part, so I now want to open it up for questions from the audience. Yes?
I can start. Go ahead, Margie. I think the new meal pattern actually levels the playing field. It used to be that there was no maximum on calories, so that you could serve as much calories as you wanted, which, as we can see, you know, with large portion sizes in restaurants and maybe fast food places, that's not necessarily the best thing for kids. So it's leveled the playing field so that there is now a calorie range, so that you can't go below a certain calories and you can't go above a certain calories. So, and those are the calories that the kids need for that particular mealtime. What we find, though, is if kids are hungry, it's because they're not eating the full meal. And that's, you know, that's something that the USDA is working on, because they've doubled the amount of fruits and vegetables that we have to serve. And the fruits and vegetables have to be on the tray now to be a reimbursable meal. So if students in the beginning now are not used to eating the fruits and vegetables, they may go through the line and not choose those. That's going to make them less full. You know, we all know that fruits and vegetables are going to fill you up. So that's one important thing, is we need to promote the fruits and vegetables to the students and to the faculty and to the parents, so that everybody encourages students to choose all the foods that they can get. Lots of times, many times, students go through that line and take 2 things. And that's not going to fill them up, and they are going to be hungry. But I think if they do take everything that's offered to them, they'll find that they're satisfied. Also, the school meals are not designed to offer the number of calories that an athlete might need. They're designed for, you know, the average student who gets the average amount of exercise. So those, for sports teams, they may need to supplement the food during the day in order to get the amount of calories that they need for that sporting event.
I'd also like to add that, you know, I think it's also really important to look at, are these students eating breakfast? Because in many cases they're not. And if the school is offering a breakfast program, usually the participation is less than a far small percent of how many are participating at lunch. And so encouraging breakfast participation, educating parents that if their child receives the free reduced benefit at lunch, they receive the same benefit at breakfast, because not all parents really understand that. So we think that they should. Our local school district for school breakfast week this past week, they actually used interns, and they were selling breakfast to parents in the carpool line, just so they would see the foods that they're serving at breakfast. And I thought it was an ingenious way to really start promoting their program so that parents can see, hey, good breakfast is really available here at school.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I'd like to reinforce this about breakfast. If you look at the data, on any given school day, about 11 million children eat breakfast at school. On any given school day, about 31 million eat lunch. So it's about a 1 to 3. And of that 20 million gap between 11 million and 31 million, half of those kids, 10 million of them, would have qualified for free breakfast.
Oh, that's amazing. Yes, over here.
I used to work at my local food bank. I worked on the backpack program there. And one of the things that I learned was, obviously I worked with low-income families. A lot of those kids didn't make it. They had to take the bus and they didn't make it to school. So they were missing breakfast and they didn't have the opportunity for good nutrition on the weekends. Do any of y'all work with your local food banks? And I know most of them have RDs that run those programs. Do you work with those registered dietitians to ensure that your low-income kids are getting adequate nutrition besides just at school? Or if they do miss breakfast, are they getting the opportunity to miss a few minutes of class so that they're getting those calories in the morning?
Do you want to start with that one?
I think in addition to first I'll address the bus issue. That's something that the school needs to be working on then with the bus routes and with the school food service personnel, making sure that those buses are arriving in time for breakfast. In my school district, if we knew there was an issue with buses arriving late, this principal would come to the cafeteria, let us know, and we would hold breakfast for those children and certainly give them an opportunity, or working with the school that could do a grab-and-go breakfast, working with them to have breakfast in the classroom. So that helps with that issue. I think that's wonderful, though, idea to work with the food bank. I personally have not done that, but I think that would be a wonderful way to help with that issue.
If I could add, schools are also looking at that issue because it's a problem with a lot of kids. They can't get to school that early. So there's lots of creative work going on with how to get breakfast to kids in school, not just the traditional breakfast, but breakfast in the classroom, so that if they are in school at the right time but can't get there early, breakfast in the classroom is exploding. So that's another great opportunity. And the other thing that schools are working on is like a second breakfast that's really more like a snack time. So if kids weren't able to eat for whatever reason, there's an opportunity to have a second breakfast. So the thing that all of you can do is to work with your schools to try to get that into schools, because sometimes it's hard to figure that out because schools have other priorities, and the second breakfast might be at a time where they want to really do something else. People are now understanding more and more how important breakfast is to their academic achievement as well as their health. So it's very important for people like registered dietitians to get involved in the school to help them understand how important that breakfast is. So and we talked earlier about all the opportunities that you have to do that. And just one other thing is, it's so important when you hear about kids not being full or satisfied after lunch, that breakfast is just so important, because you probably have had the experience personally. Maybe you skipped breakfast for some reason, you couldn't get to it. At lunchtime, lunch doesn't fill you up. Like you're still hungry because you didn't eat breakfast. So that's a very important message to give to kids. It's like you really have to eat, breakfast should be the first meal of the day, and then that way the school lunch will fill you up because you didn't get to that lunch starving. And that's another important message.
Thanks. I saw another question. Yes.
One of the biggest challenges I've seen in the schools I've worked in is, regardless of how healthy the meals are, then there's also a la carte sales along with those meals to help the schools meet the bottom line. And so I wanted to ask what, if any, methods
Well, that's about to change. There was a proposed rule that was issued in early February that basically puts all foods outside of the cafeteria in school on the same playing field as the school cafeteria. Now, it's not final yet, but the comments were due on this past Monday. As all of us up here know, we're writing them. But anyway, there are going to be some major changes in schools. The challenge, I think, is how is it going to be policed? And it's the responsibility going to go on the food service director to be the cop or the bad guy in the school, which is going to be a very difficult position to put them in.
Okay. I am so sorry, but I think that we are out of time and we need to leave for the next speaker. If you have any other questions, you can come up here and ask our panelists, but thank you so much.
Thank you.